To thank you all for joining us this evening. As you've seen, we will be recording this session just so that we can capture it in case you want to go back and review it, and for any folks that weren't able to join us tonight. It has been a very busy summer planning for us to return in person next year, and I'm excited to walk you guys through some of the things that we are continuing, some of the things that have changed. As always, Lisa has agreed to be our facilitator tonight. So as I'm going through the content of the presentation, please use the chat feature to chat any of the questions that you might have to Lisa. We will do our very best to get to all of the questions tonight. If there are any that we're not able to answer in this meeting, we will be sure to either respond to you individually if it's a question specific to your family, or share the response to the questions that we got with the larger community when we send out the recording of tonight's meeting. Before we jump into the content, I do want to officially welcome everyone. We have a lot of returning families that are on tonight, our faculty here, but want to extend an extra special welcome to all of the new families that have joined Willow this evening. It's great to see you all virtually tonight, and looking forward to seeing you as the school year kicks off in just a couple of weeks. So I will kick us off by sharing an agenda to give you an overview of what we'll be covering tonight. So we'll do a very quick overview and side-by-side of the protocols that we had in place compared to what we will have last year compared to what we'll have this year. And so we'll go into detail about which protocols have continued and which we've updated. We will also preview, it'll be a very high level preview of our schedule, and share both some exciting upcoming events and important next steps. All right, and before we jump into the details, I do want to share a little bit of the context for and the guiding thoughts and philosophies that we were thinking about as we made the adjustments to what this year was going to look like. So of course, paramount is the health and safety of our entire community. That is really important to us, ensuring that our kids are safe, ensuring that our faculty are safe, and that our parents are safe as well. Trying to maximize time in school, so trying to limit any disruptions to students being able to attend school in person, and also trying to limit any disruptions to individual students, so making sure that we are keeping them safe here and that we are, as much as possible, limiting any disruptions to students individually being able to attend school. We were hoping that this year would look a little bit more normal and more back to our old traditions and typical events and traditions. But again, given how things have changed over the summer, we are having to make some adjustments, but our goal is to bring back as many of those traditions, events, programs, experiences, and parts of the overall Willow approach that are so foundational to who we are and why the school is so special. So we unfortunately weren't able to go back exactly as things were pre-pandemic, but we're trying to get as close to that as possible. We certainly want to honor families' individual choices as much as possible and trying to balance what requirements we have in place while allowing for that personal choice in terms of your personal and health decisions. And also knowing that this is an ever-changing environment. And so we have to be flexible and responsive. And to be fully honest, we were sitting and updating this presentation minutes before we jumped on, because that's how quickly things are changing in terms of transmission rates and hospitalizations, along with guidance from key health officials like the CDC and the New Jersey State Department of Health. And those are folks that we really are relying on to continue to provide guidance and updates so that we can continue to adjust our procedures and our protocols. And one thing that is new is that the CDC is really asking schools to look at decisions on an individual level, to layer on additional protocols and precautions if we're seeing that numbers in terms of spread and hospitalizations are increasing, and start to pull those back as soon as it's safe to do so. So with that, here's a quick overview of what we are continuing versus what we've updated. So we will continue our indoor masking following the guidance and mandate from New Jersey Department through the governor's office. So all of our faculty and our students will have to wear masks when they're indoors. We are, of course, committed to our outdoor learning. And again, during this warmer weather, hoping to have students outside as much as 70% of the school day. And I'll talk a little bit more about the enhancements that we made last year to our outdoor spaces and how those will continue this year. Certainly ensuring that anytime that students or faculty are sick, that they prioritize staying home and then work with our school nurse, Leanne, who will be here full time next year, to discuss what symptoms they're seeing and discuss appropriate next steps for that student or for that faculty member. When indoors, our students will remain in cohorts. This year is a little bit different. We've had a lot of growth in our lower school. So we'll have 2 sections of preschool, first grade, second grade, and third grade. And we'll actually treat both of those sections as one big cohort. And similarly, our middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, those are a little bit smaller classes. So we will treat 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as one big combined cohort. Given the amount of time we'll be spending outdoors, we are continuing with our relaxed dress code, which was a change last year, but we'll continue that this year with one small adjustment, which again, I will share shortly. Though we'd hope to bring lunch back to the Willow tradition of eating together in the lunchroom and mixed grade tables in order to ensure the safety of our students, we will be serving lunch in the classrooms in pre-ordered individual containers. We're going to continue our enhanced cleaning, and certainly all the enhancements we made to our ventilation system are still in place. And those are some of the things that we know are most critical to ensuring the safety of our community. And of course, we'll continue to encourage and model effective personal hygiene, as we know that those are important practices to keep our kids and our faculty and parents safe. The changes you'll see, one big one being that we are not, at least for the time being, going to be offering a blended or virtual option. We really are expecting that all of our students will be attending in person this year. And I'll talk a little bit about what that's going to look like if students need to quarantine for any period of time. We're going to continue at-home testing or COVID testing, but changing it to samples being collected at home. So it's a bit of we'll continue the weekly testing, but I'll talk about how that testing is going to look differently this year. We are not going to continue the health screenings and temperature checks. And again, just ask that parents be very intentional about checking for different symptoms before they bring their kids to school and having those conversations directly with Leanne, the nurse. But we didn't find that the health screenings or temperature checks really created any additional safety to the community. What was most critical with this was checking for students for symptoms at home and then those conversations with the school nurse. We are looking at bringing parents and visitors back to school for different events in person, and I'll talk about what that's going to look like to ensure we're doing so safely. We've adjusted our quarantine protocols to align with the new guidance from the CDC and New Jersey Department of Health. We've adjusted our social distancing. So the guidance had been 6 feet last year. That's been reduced to 3 feet. And we've made that adjustment knowing that our kids will be masked when they're indoors. We're adjusting slightly our pickup and drop-off procedures. So we're eliminating one of the drop-off and pickup locations. And again, I'll share more detail about that shortly. And we are resuming some of our traditions like our in-person morning gathering, our mixed cohort outdoor recess, and some of our after-school activities. So now I'll go into a little bit more detail about our continuing protocols. So as I shared earlier on a couple of weeks ago, the governor did make the mandate that all students and faculty regardless of vaccination status, need to wear masks whenever they are indoors. Obviously, one exception to that is if students are outdoors, but they've also included additional exceptions to wearing masks indoors when students are eating lunch or snack. And of course, we would keep our students socially distanced at least 3 feet apart when they're doing so. And we'll try as much as possible to eat outdoors, weather permitting. And they've also made an adjustment to the guidance about the mask mandate indoors, excluding when students are taking part in a high intensity activity. And for us, there may be some activities in our wellness space, which of course, as you guys all know, is a big open space. So we'll still allow for that social distance. But if students are really exerting themselves, they will be able to remove their mask during that time. It is really critically important, especially given how contagious this new Delta variant is, that our students wear appropriate masks and that they're using them effectively. So as noted last year, you'll kind of see the 4 different types of masks that are ideal. It is important that you use natural fabrics. So if you're going to be using a traditional cloth face mask, it should be 100% cotton and have at least 2 layers of fabric. We are allowing neck gaiters as long as they're at least 90% cotton and again are 2 layered. Disposable surgical masks are a great alternative to the cloth masks and offer a lot of protection with breathability. And of course, the highest level of protection comes from KN95 or N95 masks, which we highly recommend. And they've since developed smaller masks for both KN95 and 95 masks that fit younger kids comfortably. One thing that is a change is that we are requiring that all masks have a built-in nose clip, either plastic or metal, that can be adjusted. That ultimately does ensure that it fits the student snugly and limits any potential risk of exposure to that student or to other students in their class. So please note that that is a change. All masks that students are wearing do have to have that built-in nose clip to fit those students snugly. And a big thank you to Jan and Vidi, who again this year have donated masks that they had made for the school that are 100% cotton, that are 2-ply, that are adjustable, and that have that metal clip built into them. You can actually see it. One of our students, Kalia, is wearing the blue one there on the left side of that picture. And so we will have a stock of those at school if students ever need to change a mask during the day, or if a mask that they have isn't fitting appropriately, and we will be providing a set of 5 for all the new families to have at home to use as needed. Outdoor learning is always really important at Willow, and last year we recommitted to the importance of that and are continuing that commitment moving forward. As many of the returning parents saw last year, we created dedicated outdoor classrooms for every class in the lower school and in the middle school. And in addition to that, we created some larger covered outdoor classrooms as well. So we will continue to improve those spaces and have those available to all the classes. And again, in these warmer months, we are committing to getting our kids out as much as possible. Ideally, 70% of their day will be outdoors, and that's inclusive of instructional time. Given how much our kids will be outdoors, we have agreed to continue our more relaxed dress code for next year. We sent out the updated dress code, so please, in the last mailing, and it'll go out again with the new mailing that's going out this Friday. So please take the time to read through that, as there are a couple of places where it's specific to the grade level that your child is in. But the biggest change in terms of the dress code does apply to all students. This year, students cannot wear athletic pants or made out of athletic material or sweatpants. And as always, it's really important to us that students aren't wearing any lettering or images that are distracting. So please ensure that the shirts or pants or sweatshirts that your kids are wearing don't have images or lettering related to TV, movie, or video games. Lunch this year will look very similar to last year, though this year lunch is going to be provided for all students. It will not be charged to families individually. So we're working with Brock, our same lunch provider, who did a great job last year and is continuing to work with us to improve and modify the options that we provide for lunch for students. And as was the case last year, there will be an online ordering portal, and weekly you should be going in and choosing the specific lunches that your kid is going to be provided in the classroom. Those meals will be prepared in our kitchen and then individually wrapped in prepackaged reusable containers, and those are compostable, though they can be used a number of times. And so we were very intentional about what containers we were providing lunch in, to do so safely, but being aware of not having a negative impact in terms of the materials that we're using and not creating additional waste. And in line with that, we do ask again that students bring their own reusable silverware daily and their own cloth napkins to eat while they're at school. As much as possible, and again, weather permitting, we will try and eat outdoors. And if we do need to be indoors and students have to remove their masks, obviously, to be able to eat, we'll ensure that they are socially distancing while they're doing so. Last year, we invested a lot into continuing to improve our already state-of-the-art ventilation systems. So the school was designed to draw the air from the buildings out and draw natural air in. And in addition to that existing air circulation system, we added air scrubbers last year in all of our buildings, with the exception of the farmhouse. And those will continue to be serviced and maintained because it adds another level of protection in terms of killing any airborne viruses or bacteria, And one thing that's also unique about these air scrubbers is that as they process the air overnight, they also sanitize surfaces. So it's a dual purpose. And again, those continue to be in place. And as we've learned, that's one of the most critical pieces in terms of being together safely in person. Now I'll jump into the updates and changes from last year. So one key one, as I shared, is we are not offering a full hybrid and virtual option, and that is going to be the case even if students are having to be home if they have to quarantine because of exposure to or having contracted COVID. The reason that we are doing that is primarily driven by the fact that we've learned from last year and that there have been changes to guidance in terms of quarantine periods. And so we expect that there will be fewer disruptions to the overall school and students being able to attend in person, but also fewer instances of students having to quarantine themselves. And we also found that providing that hybrid option and having students that were participating remotely did really impact how the teachers were able to teach and limited how hands-on and experiential the instruction could be in the classroom. And so we are hoping to not have that as an option this year so that we can preserve the learning and approaches that are so critical to our Willow philosophy and approach. In lieu of that hybrid learning, if students are having to quarantine for any period of time because of contracting COVID or COVID exposure, and again, this was something that we offered last year and we found that most of our parents ended up gravitating toward, is that the teachers will, on a daily or weekly basis, provide independent work for the student to be working on so they can keep up with what the kids are doing in class, and then schedule time twice a week to either meet with that student one-to-one to provide additional support and go through what they're working on independently, or in small groups if there are a number of kids that are having to quarantine within that class. We certainly, knowing that this is a change and we're uncertain of exactly how this will pan out, are prepared to, and we learned a lot about how to provide a virtual option and a hybrid option really seamlessly and provide that through an engaging way. So we've got all of that infrastructure in place, and we'll very quickly layer that back in if we find that there continue to be disruptions that are impacting students being able to be in school either individually or classes or the entire school population. So we are ready to make an adjustment if needed, if things don't pan out the way that we're anticipating. So know that again, that is not the plan to provide it at this point, but if things change and we find that there's a need, we'll be able to turn that back on as an option very quickly. One thing that will be different this year will be the testing that we are providing. So last year, we provided pool-based testing at school. The only option that we had for collecting samples was a nasal swab, and those samples had to be taken at home. So based on what we learned from last year, there being a number of better options in terms of testing and feedback that we heard from parents about the types of tests and the structure for how the tests were done, we've found a much better option for testing for this year. So we found a group, Sovereign Laboratory Services, that is currently based out of Fair Lawn. They'll be moving to a larger office in Hackensack shortly. And they are a full service medical group. They don't just provide laboratory services. So they have the infrastructure for keeping and maintaining health records and also to be able to bill individual families insurance. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The other benefit to SLS is that they provide 3 different types of sampling procedures. So one is a nasal swab, one is an oral swab, and one is a saliva-based test where you collect saliva in a vial. And so we will be providing testing kits at school. Those will go home weekly. And then we're anticipating, we haven't finalized exactly which day it's going to be, but the students will have to bring that sample back to school and we'll collect them there. And then they'll be delivered to a nearby lab where they will be tested specifically for the COVID virus. The saliva-based testing, it requires a decent amount of saliva to be collected. And so that can be challenging for younger kids to be able to do effectively. And so the guidance from the laboratory is for younger kids to use the oral swab instead of the saliva-based tests. So the current plan is for students in grades pre-K through 1 to use the oral swab, and students in 2nd grade through 8th grade to use the saliva-based test. And these are all highly vetted PCR tests that are highly effective. And another thing for parents to know, if they're concerned about having their student use any type of swab, we can allow younger students, if the family prefers that, to do the saliva collection test rather than the oral swab. And if you'd like to do something other than what we're recommending for that grade level, you can just coordinate that directly with Leanne. One of the benefits to providing this service is that it's not pooled testing. So each individual is tested and we'll get results for every individual that was tested within a 28 to 48 hour period. And not only will the school be informed of anyone within our community, faculty or students, if they tested a positive, but the families, as the tests are conducted, will get a notification and be able to go in and see the test results for their individual child. So again, going through a company like SLS allows for that. As I said, the testing kits will be distributed and collected at school weekly, and we'll be sharing more info about what days those will be distributed and collected. But you will have to go in and provide your family's individual insurance. And that will all be done through the SLS's web portal. You should note that there is no cost to having these tests done, but it allows individuals to be tested and for you to have access to that medical information, and will be tracked through your insurance, but there's no cost for that testing to be done. And all of that information is submitted online to ensure that it remains safe and confidential. And if there's any families that have any issues with insurance or don't have private insurance, please reach out to me and we can discuss alternatives. And as we offered last year, if there are families that want to use a test that is different than the ones we are providing at school, you can certainly talk to Leanne, and we can go through different options for at-home testing that you could use as an alternative. So please reach out to her if you would like to do something other than the school-based testing that we're offering. The testing will begin that first full week of school on that week of September 12th, and we'll be sending out the link for you to complete the consent forms and update your insurance information so that we'll be ready to start testing that week of September 12th. This year, as I said, we are not going to be using the Health Track app daily. Rather, we are asking that parents be really intentional about tracking student symptoms at home and be reporting those to the nurse in the morning. Leanne has been really great about fielding calls first thing in the morning so parents can have those conversations before they leave home and drive to school. And on the left, you will see the list of typical COVID symptoms, so you can read through those. But obviously there are other illnesses not related to COVID that might require you to keep your child at home. So really what's best is if your student is exhibiting any of the symptoms that you see there, please take the time to call Leanne, share what you're observing and what the child has experienced, and she will give you specific steps in terms of whether the child should come to school and whether the child needs to go out to get tested. We are really looking forward to having our parents and visitors be able to come back in person in addition to our teachers and our students being there. We want to be able to do that while trying to mitigate as much risk as possible. And one thing you guys should note is that very few independent schools are actually allowing for in-person events and for families to attend in person. Most are sticking to their protocols from the previous year. And we feel confident in our ability to allow folks to attend with precautions in place. And so that obviously would include anyone who is inside our buildings wearing masks, socially distancing as much as possible, the regular testing that we're going to be doing weekly, and also asking that any folks that are going to attend in-person events at the school that are indoors be fully vaccinated. The only exception would be to that policy would be if you have contracted and had a verified COVID exposure and were sick and recovered from that for a 3-month window following when there was a positive test and you've recovered, you are still, the belief is that you are still protected. And so you would be treated as someone that did in fact get vaccinated for that 3-month period. We will be sending out on Friday a a health questionnaire. The responses to that will all go directly to Leanne, who maintains all confidential medical information. And so she will be tracking both who is vaccinated in your home, including parents, siblings, and Willow students, as well as whether or not anyone in your family has recovered from COVID over the summer, again, because both of those will determine who is able to attend in-person events indoors. And the other piece to note is that it's important for us to understand our middle school population. Many of those students are now old enough to be vaccinated, to understand how many of those students are vaccinated, because that will guide what types of opportunities we can offer them, including field trips, overnight trips, and so some of the key experience for the middle school. And it'll also guide who would be excluded from weekly testing, because if you've tested positive within the last 3 months, you should not continue getting COVID tested during that period. And again, all information will go through and maintained by our school nurse, so it will be kept confidentially. Again, as I shared, the quarantine guidance is different this year. It's a smaller window than it had been in the past, and is really driven by different statistics in terms of COVID spread and hospitalizations in your area. And the state is essentially identifying 4 areas of risk, and that will lead to the length of the quarantine. So in areas where there are lower risks, there's a shorter quarantine period. In areas where there's higher risk, there's a longer quarantine period. And note that this could change at any point, and so we will have to adapt. Currently, we're in the moderate risk zone, which I will give specifics to here. So the current guidance, because we are in that moderate risk area, is that if a student or a faculty member tests positive for COVID, they have to quarantine for 10 days and be symptom-free for at least 24 hours. For anyone that has a potential exposure, and that is considered, and this is specific to K-12 schools, a close contact would be someone who is unmasked within 3 feet for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period, or anyone that is exhibiting any COVID symptoms. They will have to quarantine for 17 days. They can test between days 5 and 7 and return to school with a negative test and being symptom-free for at least 24 hours. You can, of course, choose not to test, in which case you would have to quarantine for the full 10 days. And the exceptions to that are any students or staff who are fully vaccinated and recovered, or recovered from a diagnosed COVID infection in the past 3 months. And they do not have to quarantine as long as they remain asymptomatic, even if they've had a close contact with someone that had a known COVID infection. And again, this is all the policy driven by the New Jersey Department of Health. The link is there, and we'll share that when we send out the presentation as well, so you can read through those at your convenience. And we do feel really confident that with our increased testing, with all the safety protocols that we have in place, having our faculty fully vaccinated, that there will be less quarantines this year and fewer disruptions to our in-person learning. Currently, New Jersey has lifted all of its travel restrictions, so there's no travel advisory. So at the moment, families that are traveling domestically do not have to quarantine following a trip. That obviously is subject to change, and we anticipate that it will, and we will keep you guys all appraised of any changes to those guidelines, as we may need to adjust that if the family or the students will be traveling. Again, there are no restrictions in terms of international travel either, but in most places that you are traveling outside of the US, whatever country you're traveling for will have specific guidance in terms of when you test, either when you're flying out to that country or returning, that you should follow. And of course, follow all the CDC guidelines and recommendations as well if you will be traveling. Last year, we had 4 drop-off locations. This year, we're dropping that down to 3, and you'll see those noted there. So all of our preschool students will go in through that west end door, which is right next to the circled area where it says pre-K, and that's the entrance just for our pre-K students. And parents can park in that preschool parking area and walk their kids over for pickup and dismissal. Our K through 2 students will be dismissed from the car loop. And then, because our 3rd and 4th grade will be over in the barn, 3rd, third grade through eighth grade will be picked up and dropped off over at that area outside the art room. So just 3 pickup and drop off locations this year. Please note that if you have a preschooler who has older siblings, any students that are in that schoolhouse will be dismissed to the pre-K area so they can be picked up with their pre-K siblings, and parents that have older kids beyond any kids that are in K2 class, they should continue around the ring road to that next pickup location to pick up older siblings. We will be returning to our in-person Willow gatherings, and they will look a little bit differently this year. So we are, based on feedback from parents and our faculty, this year we are piloting doing a morning gathering on Mondays and an end of day gathering on Fridays. And you can see the times for those noted there. We are just going to be doing the all school morning gatherings on Mondays and Fridays. We're not going to have a specific lower school morning gathering on Tuesdays, but of course, vaccinated parents will be invited to attend those in person. We will be moving them over to the health and wellness space. Though it's, the studio is the ideal location for those Willow gatherings. The movement space is going to allow more area for us to socially distance the cohorts of students and be able to invite parents to come in and also be socially distanced. Everyone who is attending will have to be masked, and the exception will be the person that's leading morning gathering when they're speaking will be able to remove their masks to do so. And of course, parents that are vaccinated will be invited to attend. And we are looking at being able to live stream those morning gatherings for parents that are not able to be vaccinated or aren't able to attend that day. So you can watch that live from the comfort of your own home. We are bringing back music to our morning gathering. That's a really important part of it. Rather than having students project when they sing, which does increase the risk of exposure and spread, students will be masked and asked to sing quietly along during the closing song for morning gathering. The first morning gathering this year will be an afternoon gathering at last period on September 10th, and parents are invited to attend then. Following that, for 2 full weeks, we take time to practice the procedures for entering and leaving morning gathering, for being fully engaged with that just with our students. And then after that 2-week period, parents are invited to attend again in person. The first date that would happen is morning gathering on September 27th. And from that point on, they're welcome to attend any of our morning or afternoon morning gatherings. We are very excited that our music program is going to return this year. Unfortunately, Gina Lefferts, our music teacher of many, many years, is not going to continue here. She's decided to work part-time, though she will be offering private music lessons again for Willow students. And she's going to be working really closely with our incredible new music teacher, Stacy Miles, to maintain the important components of that important Willow program and all the traditions that go with that. Including singing, which we'll do outdoors as much as possible, or indoors wearing masks and socially distancing, which is why it's so great that we have music classes in our studio, which will allow students to space themselves out appropriately should they have class inside. And we will be bringing back the Orff instruments as part of our music program. So excited to see the kids playing glockenspiels again this year. And the music parts of the middle school program will also be coming back. We will be offering chorus twice a week, as well as a music elective for middle school students. Last year, we had students at recess in cohorts, which really limited their ability to see kids in grades outside of their own class and either the grade above or below. So we are going back to mixed cohort outdoor recesses. You'll see when I show the schedule, we've moved the structured recess periods to later in the day. And that was something that was very intentionally done as we were looking at the schedule for this year. The first recess periods happen around lunch. They flip-flop. So our K through 4 students have lunch and then recess after that. And that will be just K to 4 students for that recess period prior to their lunch. The middle schoolers will just be out there with 5th grade. And then in the afternoon for the second recess, all students will be outside at the same time. And the only exception, of course, is preschool, who has their own schedule and their own dedicated recess space. As is custom at Willow, we will get outdoors as much as possible. So it's really important to plan for inclement weather and make sure that you are sending your kids with all the outdoor gear that will allow them to go and play outside comfortably, even when it's raining or snowing or cold. And certainly we will be mindful as we have in the past, if weather conditions are too dangerous, and then we would move recess indoors, and that would happen in their individual classroom cohorts. Another piece that we're bringing back is extended day. We're extending that back to 5 o'clock this year. We really would love for folks that want to take part in that program to commit to doing so and to share the schedule that they'll ideally have for this semester, and the form to do so is in tomorrow's mailing. One thing to know about extended day is we've moved to having that outdoors primarily most of the time, and otherwise it's inside the lunchroom because that is a place where we do have a mixed cohort to ensure that students are able to socially distance. And when they're indoors, they'll of course be wearing masks. And please, we will be allowing for any emergency drop-ins as needed for families if something comes up, to be able to use our aftercare program. As soon as you know that your child will need to stay for that, please either call the main office or use the email address listed there to let us know that your student is going to be staying. And thank you for letting us know proactively if you'll be using that regularly so we can staff accordingly. We are looking at bringing back some of our sports. So there will be another survey tomorrow to gauge how many of our students in the lower school and middle school would like to participate in soccer. And we're looking to offer that as a program this year. And having our own team coaching the soccer program for our middle school kids, and trying as much as possible to have an intramural league where we play against other schools. And it's looking a little bit more challenging this year, but also working with an external organization to offer soccer for younger kids if there's enough interest for that, and hosting these, of course, both outdoors where it's safe to do so. And we're hoping to bring back fencing, that we'll have to make a decision on that as we get closer to the winter. That would be the next semester where we'd offer fencing. We are not currently offering after school enrichment for this fall. As I said, we're trying to be intentional about layering back as much as we can slowly, and doing the things that we feel we can do most safely. After school enrichment typically takes place in classrooms indoors with kids from mixed grades. So we want to make sure that when we do bring that back, that we're able to do so safely. But please fill out tomorrow's survey so that we can start planning for what some of those after school enrichments in the spring might look like based on the interest that we hear from parents. And now a preview of our schedule. And we've spent a lot of time working through this through the school year last year and this year, as we knew that we were planning to come back to our more traditional schedule and full school day. So there's been a lot of thinking that's gone into this, and I will preview for you some of the adjustments that we've made. So I've already shared one. We really wanted to offer both a morning and afternoon gathering. So you'll see how those have been built into the schedule. And what you're seeing here is a sample schedule for 5th grade. And so see that first period on Mondays is morning gathering, which will start promptly at 8:05. Please note our drop-off window is a little bit smaller this year. We had to think very strategically about how to use every minute in the school day without going too long in the day to offer all of our great academics, all of our specials, and even transition time between classes, as we're in this beautiful open campus and it takes time to move between specials and classes within the middle school. So we had to maximize time as much as possible, which means we have a little bit of a narrower drop-off window in the mornings. So drop-off begins at 7:45 and will end promptly at 8. Students have to be in their classrooms right at 8 o'clock. So by 8:05, they'll be ready to go over for morning gathering. You'll note on the schedule that there are multiple times listed, and that's because the schedule shifts depending on whether we have morning gathering or afternoon class meetings or morning gathering. So that's why you see those 2 times listed there, sometimes from Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday through Friday. You'll also note that we've been really thoughtful about how we structured the school day based on developmentally what the needs of the kids are. So you're seeing a 5th grade schedule, and one of the things that we really wanted to prioritize, and this is true for our lower school classes, is having the core academics in the morning and having a dedicated ELA block. Now, that might look like a long time for kids to be focused on academics. What is built in there is a snack and recess time that the teachers will be able to use whenever it makes sense for that class. So it's not a set time. Teachers will give students that break in the middle of the morning as needed and as it works with the flow of what they're doing academically in the class that morning. This has also allowed us to actually offer more outdoor time. So you'll see there's that snack recess time in the morning, and then one that's paired with their lunch period, and another later in the day. So a lot of time for that unstructured play outdoors. We also thought really intentionally about the needs of our middle schoolers and lower school students, and we're prioritizing having our elective classes for middle schoolers in the morning so they can focus on their core academics in the afternoon when they tend to be more ready to do so. And conversely, for our lower school kids, making sure they have that focused academic time in the morning when they're most sharp and ready to learn, and that they have those more active classes and specials in the afternoon as they tire and it's more beneficial for them to have those classes at the end of their day versus their core academics. And again, note this allows us to have lots and lots of time outdoors and ensures that we're trying to get out at least 70% of our school day. So as we get ready for the school year, a couple of things for you to be mindful of. Last year, we drafted with our parent planning committee, our community commitments, and these are things that are really important for families to commit to in and outside of school to keep our community safe. So please make sure that you read that carefully, and there's an acknowledgement that you will have to sign and submit for that, ensuring that you have read it and are committing to those important commitments that we're all making to keep our community safe and stay in person as long as we possibly can. We've also updated and we'll be sending out the parent handbook. So again, take time to read through that. There's a lot of important information there, and another form for you to sign acknowledging that you've received it and read through it. And again, those will be included in tomorrow's mailing that will go out. Also in tomorrow's mailing, a couple of really important forms and questionnaires. So that health questionnaire that I mentioned will be included in that. The forms to sign acknowledging that you've read and received the parent handbook and community commitments, the survey for fall and spring sports, and the registration forms for preschool stay and play and for extended day. So please complete those. And along with those attachments and surveys and forms will be a lot of other helpful information. So please take time to read through those two mailings. A lot of important information is there. And as you're going through those, please reach out to myself, to Megan, to Lisa, to Jim if you're having any issues accessing any of those documents. And if you do not happen to receive tomorrow's mailing, please reach out, and those typically go out at 5 o'clock on Friday. Please reach out to Carrie because there's some issue in terms of you receiving that she will work through to make sure that you're getting all the school communications moving forward. And please note those back to school forms are really important. Those will have to be completed and those are now overdue. So if you have not completed those, please make the time to do so that your student's ready to start on September 9th. Couple of really fun events coming up early in the year. The first are the new family orientations. We're offering an in-person and a virtual option for those. So those will be on September 1st and 2nd for new families. And so Lisa will have sent you the invites for those. We'll be having our schoolhouse meetings, our virtual teacher meet and greets. So those will be done over Zoom again this year. And those will take place on the 8th. So make sure to sign up for those. So you'll have that one-to-one time with your teacher and help them get to know your student better so that they're ready to serve them starting September 9th. On the 9th, our first day of school, we'll also have our middle school orientation that morning. So that your middle schooler should be ready for that. Our first morning gathering is going to be on September 10th in the afternoon at 3:10. Our ice cream social will be that Sunday after that first week on September 12th, and that will be outdoors, and hope as many of you can attend that as possible. It's a great way to get to see returning families and get to know those new families that have joined our community. We'll have our big PA kickoff event. Again, that will be outdoors, and that'll be on September 22nd. And then our back to school is going to be virtual. Back to school night is going to be virtual again this year, and that will be on September 30th. And we'll send out the details of timing for that as we get closer to that event. And then a couple of other events that are coming up a little further out. We are planning a big community celebration. This will be just for adults. to get to know other Willow families. And we're looking at the end of October for that, so more details to come. And last year, very sadly, we lost one of our founders, Mark Bedron, and we are looking forward to hosting a memorial for him on November 27th that we would love to invite our entire community to. So we'll be sending out details of that as we get near that date as well, but please hold that date if you'd like to attend and are able to attend. And now we will open it up to questions. So hopefully I didn't rush through that and you all found that helpful. But Lisa, any questions that you got as I was chatting?
We do have a few questions. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you here today. First question, Francisco, is do vaccinated kids still do the testing weekly?
Yes. Vaccinated kids and faculty will likely have to continue to be tested. The being vaccinated should not lead to any false positives, and it will help us catch any students or faculty that have breakthrough infections. So we're still seeking guidance from kind of the folks that have been supporting us in making these decisions. So that might change, but the current thinking is all faculty members and students, regardless of vaccine status, will be tested weekly.
Thank you. What is the protocol on a class quarantining if there's a positive case in the class?
It's going to depend on exposure. So as long as there was not that close contact, those students should not have to quarantine. But if there's any risk that there would have been close contact while the students were in school, then that class might have to go to virtual learning for 10 days while those students get tested.
Okay. Is the testing PCR? This parent's understanding was that the CDC is withdrawing a requirement for PCR testing and allowing other testing.
This is a PCR test, but again, if families have an alternative test that they want to use, we're open to doing so they can reach out to Leanne to discuss that.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit about what outdoor learning looks like in the middle school?
Yeah. So, and it should look very similar in middle school to lower school, where the teachers lead off the class with a mini lesson where they're kind of setting the tone for what the students will be learning. And as students get to that point where they are working on independent work for that class, they should be transitioning and working outside. At times, depending on what they're working on, that full lesson might be outdoors. And last year, we had a lot of middle schoolers that were virtual for the entire year, which made it more challenging. We had a higher proportion of virtual middle schoolers last year for teachers to get out as much. Now not having that hybrid option should mean that our middle schoolers are getting outdoors as much as the lower school kids were. And that's something that we're asking our faculty to commit to.
Thank you. There's a little bit of confusion around that first week of school and what's happening on the fact that Rosh Hashanah is on the 7th and then what happens on the 8th and how long the meet and greets on the 8th are.
Yeah, I believe those are 30 minutes and they'll be over Zoom. So for that day, the students don't come into school. You wouldn't come into school. There'll be a sign-up genius that goes out. You'll pick a time slot to meet with your teacher, and then you'll have a one-to-one meeting with the teacher, again, to share any context that's important for that teacher to know about working with your child. So this is a really parent-driven conversation, and I believe it's 30 minutes. Megan will be able to confirm if she's out there.
And if I could just jump in. Hi, it's Andy Prusick. Welcome, almost welcome back. In the middle school, if you would like your student to be part of those meetings, they are welcome. We've had mixed in the past, whether you want your child to be part of those meetings as well.
And Francisco, this is Megan. Hello, everyone. Those meet and greets are usually 20 minutes with a 10-minute buffer.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Cool. And then the first full day of school will be, the 9th and 10th will be 2 regular school days.
Great, thank you. For the vaccine exclusions and requirements, will we be requiring a booster once it's available?
To be determined, and we're going to rely on guidance from the state and the CDC. No decision yet on that.
And then another vaccine question, is there a vaccine requirement for faculty and staff and students who are candidates for the vaccine?
Not for students. It's highly recommended for students, but all staff have been mandated to do so unless, of course, they needed a religious or medical exemption. And we have almost 100% vaccination rate for our faculty and staff.
Thank you. Can unmasked siblings under the age of 2 come to morning gatherings?
We have not talked about that. My guess is yes, as long as the family members are vaccinated. But we will make a note to discuss that with our team that's determining these safety protocols and circle back.
Okay, let's see. Will we have the option to send lunch from home, or will all lunch be from school?
No, any family can opt out and send lunch on any given day.
As long as it's not free.
As long as it's not free. Thank you, Lisa.
What is the vaccine status requirement for attending indoor events other than morning gathering?
It's the same. So any parent volunteers, anyone that's attending in-person events at Willow will have to be vaccinated and have to show proof of vaccine to Leanne. We, of course, will try and host as many of our events as possible outdoors to open that up to any member of our community to be able to attend. And that's why we're doing our PA kickoff meeting outside. So as much as possible, we'll try to have our big community events outdoors to allow everyone to participate. But if they have to be hosted indoors, you will need to be vaccinated to attend.
Okay, another question just about that first week, just clarifying the 9th and 10th are both full days, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are parents, is it available for parents to bring their children over before the first day and just kind of wander around and help the kids become familiar with the buildings?
Yes, but if you would like to do that, please reach out to the main office to schedule a time to do so. Next week, we have all of our faculty meetings. So we just want to make sure if you'd like to do so that we can find a window for you to do that where you won't run into any of the meetings that are taking place that week, but certainly happy to accommodate that.
And I'm happy to walk any of you around as well if you want to reach out to me. Okay, just another clarification on lunch. Yes, you may send lunch for your children. You don't have to order through the cafeteria, though that cost is included. It just needs to be not free.
Correct.
And then another lunch question. Can you clarify how lunch works for preschool?
So preschoolers, if they'd like to order lunch, they'll be able to go into the portal and order lunch. It'll be the same menu options as our K through 8th students have. That is not part of the tuition for preschool students, so they will have to pay a per lunch fee if they'd like to order that.
Will there be the same protocol as last year in terms of full school quarantine if there are cases in multiple classrooms or just individual classrooms?
Yeah, the current guidance is we'd have to go all virtual if we had positive cases in 2 separate pods that weren't unrelated, because if it was 2 separate pods, but the link was a sibling, then we wouldn't have to go all virtual. But yes, the current guidance is still all virtual if we have unrelated exposures in more than one cohort.
Which is why we're being so careful. Will lunch be in the cafeteria or the classrooms?
For students in preschool through 5th grade, lunch will be in the classroom. The middle schoolers will be able to eat in the lunchroom, but socially distanced. And they'll have individually packaged lunches. It won't be our traditional lunch program, but they'll be able to eat in that lunchroom together because they're essentially one big cohort.
And how far in advance will the lunch menu be posted?
The prior week, but I will confirm with Brock when those will be posted, but it's usually a week in advance.
I think that, let's see. Yep, I think that's it for now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for moderating, Lisa, facilitating rather, and thank you all for joining tonight. And please, as you process through what we've shared tonight, if you have any questions or concerns that have come up for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or any of the other folks on the admin team. It was a question specific for them. And we appreciate all of the feedback that you've given us as we made the plans to try and open again safely this year, and again, try and bring back as many of the core components of our program as possible. Again, things will be changing, so please stay tuned as we're having to make adjustments. And it could go both ways. We could potentially scale back some of these protocols, or we may have to add additional ones. So thank you for your flexibility and your grace as we work to return in person safely and continue to adjust as we go through the year. All right, thank you all for being here tonight.